Hi guys, Ronnie here. Today I'm in my paint cave and what I want to discuss with you is a thing that I've been Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome to my paint cave. Today I want to discuss a topic that has been bugging me for the last couple of days since it's winter now where I live in the northern hemisphere. Although the weather is quite mild, so luckily we don't get too much snow or freezing temperatures or anything like that, but still there are lots of days where it's really on the borderline whether you should be on the trainer or just go riding outside and brave the cold and bad weather. So what is the best option? What are the downsides to each in my experience? So let's talk about outdoor riding first. Of course, it's for me it's more fun and more engaging. You cannot really overheat in the winter. You can go for longer rides without feeling bored or without feeling discomfort because you can move around on the bike. You can go to corners, do climbs, then go to tuck on the descent. The added benefit of riding through the winter is we get a better feel for bike handling. So when the roads are slippery and greasy, you can build that confidence up where you need to when do you need to brake, how hard can you corner. And one thing that's extremely important for me as a racer is that riding in bad conditions give you that mental fortitude and experience which you can actually use at the races. Because to be honest, if you are a recreational cyclist or even if you are taking cycling seriously but you only use it to improve your fitness without actual competition, then I don't think that it's really worth going outside and wearing out your bike, risking getting a cold or an injury or just feeling unpleasant. Instead, you should just hop on an indoor trainer, go do some high quality intervals and you're done. But if you're a racer and are starting to get serious about racing, then it can happen that when you show up at a race, it's going to be windy, it's going to be cold, it's going to rain. So first you will need to be able to adapt to that mentally so it doesn't put you off your race focus, should I say, or in your mind. Secondly, you need the bike handling skills to deal with that, the road conditions and such, mud on the road, etc. And thirdly, I think perhaps the most important of these, or the thing that finishes or tops these two things off, is you get experience in terms of clothing and preparation and your technical preparation. You will know exactly what you need to wear for what conditions, in which temperature. You will know what to do with your bike, you will know your tire pressures, your tire type, your chain lubrication, and well, all these details that can really make or break your event. So yeah, if you're a competitive cyclist and you're going to race, then in the early season, most of the time it happens that there's rain and cold, and if you never do riding outside in bad conditions, then you are really not prepared, even though you have the fitness, which is very important. But without these things, I think it's not worth too much. Many people would argue that it's not really possible to do quality interval work outside, but in my experience that can be done very well. You just need to take your terrain and your conditions into consideration. So for example, if you have a couple of high intensity long blocks, then you should do them, for example, against a headwind and just cruise back on the way home. Or if you have some short sharp efforts, then make sure that these are hitting the short hills or the short climbs you're doing on your route, so it just makes kind of a logical sense. This is how the load would come if you were in a race, and it just feels more natural, even though it might not perhaps have a strict, say, recovery periods between them, but races don't do that anyway. So if you're doing it in a sensible manner, it can be done very, very effectively. Then if you talk about the negatives of outdoor riding in bad conditions, first you have that obvious discomfort. You need to get used to that if you want to race, as I mentioned. If not, it's just pointless to making yourself suffer even more, in my opinion. Then secondly, it's not really the best for your bike. That's one of the reasons why I keep my time trial bike on the trainer during the winter. So one thing is I don't have to keep swapping the bikes. Second one, on the time trial bike you go a lot faster for the same effort, so that's not very present when it's cold. And it's a bit more fragile than a regular road bike because it's more complicated. So the grime can really take its toll on that. So yeah, that's one negative, wearing out your equipment. Then of course you get the risk of getting cold or getting an injury when you have a crash on slippery surfaces. That's really not ideal. Then in terms of time, it takes up a lot more time when you decide to ride outdoors, because you have to go through all the clothing. You can easily have 10 items of clothing or even more to keep comfortable. Then afterwards you have to wash this everything. You have to wash the bike, or at least take care of it in some way. You have to make sure to be safe, to be seen, so you need lights, you need to remember about charging them. And generally it takes a lot more preparation, a lot more time, so you get less time for the same, so less quality time on the bike for the same time expended. Or perhaps another way, if you want to have a 2-hour quality ride, then another hour or two goes into the preparation before and afterwards. So that's not really good if you are tight on time. Positive for outdoor training that I should mention is the fact, well, it might be personal or subjective to me, but I feel that when I ride outdoors, the same efforts are a bit easier to do. So it's not a night and day difference, but mainly in terms of long rides, I find it less taxing mentally and physically to do hard intervals out there. While on the other hand, when I get into a ride that I'm not really enjoying and I'm just trying to survive, I feel cold and uncomfortable, then it's rather the other way around. In these situations, I find myself that I need to switch in sort of a time trial mode just to get home, instead of focusing on my intervals because I'm too cold or too uncomfortable or whatever. So sometimes this can make for good training, but it's not really focused, so you can definitely get some more focused workouts indoors. Right, so if you talk about indoor training, in the past I have really tried to avoid this, so I rode in quite horrible weather, and yeah, that has some merits, of course, but nowadays I use Zwift, I use smart trainers, and it's a whole different game, quite literally in fact, because Zwift indeed is a computer game that you play with your bike. So yeah, that makes it a whole lot more enjoyable. It just takes your mind off the suffering a bit, and it can really motivate you when you see others around. And even in the workout mode, that's what I use for the most part. There are some excellent workouts, really high quality stuff done by professional coaches. So yeah, just some high quality training can be done in arguably less time than outdoors, and it keeps track of you. So if you go away from your zones or you're not hitting your targets, then it will remind you and try to steer you in the right direction. So yeah, in that regard, it's an excellent choice. Then another thing I have explored recently are the Zwift races, which can be a lot of fun, but they are very, very competitive. I have to sign into the A class, so the most competitive one, because of my threshold power, and there are some really, really strong riders in there, and so it makes for really, really hard work. But I guess if you want to prepare for racing, there's no better preparation than racing itself. So hopefully that will work out for me just fine. Downsides to indoor training: even though I use Zwift and Zwift workouts, it's still not as enjoyable for me as riding outside. You just can't replicate that feeling when you're going fast on a nice road. Then there is some misinformation about this, but some people say that it's quite damaging for a bike to be clamped in the trainer. Well, don't think that's actually true, because on the road you can have much higher loads than that. But what can damage your bike is galvanic corrosion from your sweat. So as you can see, I always have a towel on top of my aero bars here, so the sweat is not coming into the aluminum parts, and together with the carbon that could cause some corrosion and potentially some failure. So keep that in mind. One thing I'm particularly that is really beneficial for me with indoor training is that I can actually force myself to do recovery rides and easy rides, because I have to be honest here, I hate riding slowly or relatively slowly in terms of my fitness and condition. And I just can't really force myself to do that outdoors. Whereas on the indoor trainer, I don't really perceive that, so I can just spin along easily without feeling any weird sensations. Because yeah, I just, when there's a headwind or some hills and trying to ride along at a steady, easy pace, and you are barely making progress, that's not really good fun. So I tend to avoid it. So whenever there's a recovery ride on my schedule, I try to do it indoors, so that way it can be really a recovery ride instead of just chasing against the headwind. These are my experiences, and how do I compare indoor and outdoor training? For the most part, I try to stay outdoors. But nowadays I have a good alternative with Zwift indoor sessions, so I don't really go into very extreme weather. And perhaps that's good for my health and for my general motivation. It's also a nice way, so when you're riding in bad conditions outdoors, then it keeps you motivated when you get back on the indoor trainer, and vice versa. If there's some good weather suddenly outside, then you can hop off the trainer and be very motivated outside. So it's good to mix your training around a bit. Okay, so I think that's all for today, all of my experiences so far. If you'd like to see my indoor training setup or the bikes that I use, then don't forget to tune into my channel and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.